She was there all along, of course, standing in the corner, the back corner of the room, even before people arrived there in the synagogue. She'd come early so she could have her spot there in the corner because it is safest there in the corner. She didn't have to worry about bumping into people whose eyes she couldn't meet. She didn't have to worry about the gazes that glanced by her. And she could stand there leaning against the walls, leaning her aching back as she stood there. She was there all along, so familiar that nobody even saw her anymore, the town cripple, there in her usual spot, so familiar that she was completely invisible. From there in her corner, of course, she could only see the world from the waist down, and so she knew the people of her village, her neighbors, mostly by their sandals. And you can tell a lot about a person by the sandals that they wear. She could tell the farmers who would come with dirt so thick on their feet, it was like they had wrapped their feet in a brown cloth. She could tell the fishermen, because the strings of their sandals would still be wet, and sometimes, and she'd smile privately to herself at this, sometimes she could still see the fish scales still stuck between the laces there. She could tell the mothers who came by on their swollen ankles as they were pregnant, with the children pulling them backward, leading by the hand. Mama, why does she? Oh, she didn't mind the kids, though. She didn't mind the kids because they were honest with their questions, and as short as they were, she could meet their eyes, and sometimes they'd smile back at her. And she didn't really understand when, in the middle of their guest rabbi's teaching, the voices started to fall silent. She didn't really understand as the feet in front of her started to shuffle off to the side, some off to the left, some off to the right. And she didn't understand as the room fell silent and everybody started waiting and someone said, "Come." She waited for someone to explain, waited for something to happen, waited, and then discovered she herself was on her way down that aisle that had formed this sort of arrow from her corner to the center of the room where that rabbi from Nazareth had been teaching. She discovered she was moving to the middle of the room until she saw his sandals. You could tell a lot about someone from their sandals, and these were the sandals of a wanderer. Dust layered upon dust, layered upon dust. These were the feet of someone on the move, someone who would not stop until his mission was complete, someone who would not cease restlessly moving around the countryside until everyone given to him had been reached. She startled just a little bit when his hands rested on her shoulders, the left so much lower than the right, that terrible twist of her spine. But his hands were warm, and they were strong, and they were gentle, and she heard his voice. She heard that voice say, "Dear woman, you are set free." She waited. She waited for something to happen, someone to say something. She waited until she discovered, with a shock so great that her eyes quickly shut closed, she realized that her shoulders were untwisting, settling. And she realized that her back was straightening. That her back was straightening up as it had not for 18 long years, that she was standing up straighter, and for the first time she could take a deep breath, a full breath that had been so limited for so long. She's standing up straight, her head rising up, until finally she opened her eyes, and for the first time in 18 long years, she met the eyes of another person, and he saw her. It was him, Jesus, who saw her, and his eyes were smiling. She looked around, at her fellow neighbors and saw meeting their eyes for the first time. And as she looked around, she saw disbelief. She saw joy. She saw fear. She saw children still with the bruises from the cane. She saw women wincing away from their angry husbands. She saw hungry elders. She saw brokenness and broken relationships. She saw people in pain that they could not express. She looked around and saw the hurt of the world gathered there in the synagogue. She looked around and saw a world so in pain, it was weighed down as she had been for 18 years, so in pain and brokenness and suffering that it was hunched over as much as she had always been. She saw a world in pain, and in the middle of it all, she saw Jesus. At the heart of the world's pain stood Jesus, and he saw her, and she was free. And there was nothing else she could do for the joy that was rising up in her. She began to sing. She began to sing that joy handed down to us through the ages as it expressed from the heart in the Psalms, the songbook that's given to us. She began to sing, "Oh, bless the Lord, O my soul. Oh, bless the Lord, for he has seen his servant. Oh, bless the Lord for all he has done. Oh, bless the Lord, all you coastlands and you hills, mountains and valleys, rivers and streams, trees. Lift up your voices, shout to the heavens for the joy of the Lord. Oh, bless the Lord, oh my soul." And she sang when the council president bustled up to her and complained, "Well, this is out of order. We have certain rules that help us to know how to worship, and this is not how it's supposed to go. There are 6 days when this could happen and work could be done. Why couldn't she just wait till tomorrow?" And she sang when Jesus took this and knocked him off his high horse. "She is a daughter of Abraham, just like you. A child of God just like you. And when there is suffering in the world, it cannot wait. When someone is suffering, it cannot wait. God's heart will not wait." And she sang as she went out the door of the synagogue, and it was so much joy welling within her that her voice wasn't enough, and her feet even shuffled in an unaccustomed jig as she went down the street. She sang, for she knew why she had been set free. She knew why God had freed her. Because in the middle of a world so broken with freedom, so broken with hurt, God had freed her so that others might be free. And she knew that Jesus had set her free so that she could be his healing heart in the world, in the middle of a world where there are 4-year-old children who believe their name is idiot because that's all they've been called by those who care for them. In the middle of a world where infants are punched to death by those who are supposed to be caring for them. In a world where teenagers dabble with heroin because the expectations are impossible. In a world where women are called names and held to standards that would never be applied to a man simply because those who are saying them can hide and be anonymous. In a world where children are pulled from the rubble of a bomb lofted by the government that should be caring for him. In a world where elders have to decide between medicine and food. In a world so filled with hurt and brokenness that it hunches us over and we are weighed down. In a world so bent with the hurt, she knew that Jesus was in the heart of it. And that Jesus had set her free so that she could be his hands. She could be his heart. She could go and set others free. And so she sang. She sang with the joy that Jesus had set her free. She sang because Jesus had seen her. She sang because in the love of Jesus she was set free. And she sang because Jesus had worked for her and had blessed her for that work. She sang because Jesus had seen her. And what else could she do? What else can you do but sing? Jesus saw her.